Hello, welcome to Somerset, the site of my thesis project. My work is looking at whether agricultural waste could become a resource for future building materials, and I'm particularly looking at two products, cow manure and maize husk. Currently, globally, we're operating at a rate of consumption that requires the resource of 1.7 planet Earth, and I'm interested in investigating whether organic and agricultural waste materials could become a resource of opportunity moving forward within the built environment. Back to the studio. So my project is all about trying to generate this closed loop system whereby maize and cow manure generate two different material outputs within this loop. And essentially my proposal is to design the stomach of Glastonbury Festival, so an on-site waste processing facility that's transforming organic waste materials into both sustainable electricity and also building materials that will be then used to power both the farm and the festival, and also used in the urban and rural fabric of the surrounding environment. So I'm going to try and take you on a story of my project by showing you this really long section drawing, and I'm going to split it into four main categories. The story begins at my place of home, which is just outside of Glastonbury in Somerset in the southwest of England, in amongst some fields, as you can see in this video, and about 3 miles northeast of where I grew up is a place called Worthy Farm, which is the site for Glastonbury Festival, the world's largest music festival. And this site undergoes a huge transformation into this, which is an instant city the size of Oxford. And I'm really interested in this extreme transition between urban and rural, and then back to rural again, and the tensions that these two parameters have when they collide. And essentially I'm interested in trying to question how these two contexts could become more intertwined and used to help each other. So I'm going to start by talking about my investigation into maize. Maize is a crop that's grown all across the world primarily to feed cows, and is projected to become the largest globally grown crop by 2025. And for me, it's the view that I look out from outside of the window at my house, so I've always been interested to explore it further. I've mainly been trying to manipulate the maize husk, which is the leaf element around the outside of the crop. This is because it's a waste material. When it's harvested, it's projected back out the combine harvester onto the field and left to decompose or burnt. And it has extremely strong natural fibres, so I became very excited at how you could use these fibres to make a range of different materials that could potentially be biodegradable back into the environment after their use within a building. My investigation into maize instigated this kind of fascination about the farming industry, particularly in Somerset where I grew up, and how there's this huge gap between the food that's being produced for us and actually understanding where it comes from. And of particular interest was the vast waste resource of cow manure. And during the summer months, a lot of this manure is used as fertiliser on the fields. However, during the winter, farmers are strictly forbidden and prevented from spreading this into the fields, as it can get into the waterways. And essentially this is causing farms across the UK a huge problem, that they have so much manure, but they just don't have the capacity to store it. And this is resulting in huge amounts of manure being illegally released into the environment, causing serious damage to our waterways. A potential solution to this waste problem is anaerobic digestion, which is the process of transforming organic waste into biogas and electricity. And I became interested in a place called the Ship Museum in Italy, where they've been building this product called murder cotta out of the secondary byproduct digestate. And this is something that I've been keen to try and explore, so I've made these series of cow manure Brits ranging from 100% to 50%, which I'll explain more later in the presentation. And these were really inspired by a series of videos called Primitive Technology on YouTube. So I've developed this network of contacts from growing up near Glastonbury and working with Block 9 during my placement. And originally my project was kind of going in 3 different directions, but due to the festival being cancelled, it's gone to this agricultural waste facility. So I started looking at the 3 farms that are located on the site of Glastonbury, and did kind of an analysis of these farms to see how they're managing their waste currently. And I went to meet a guy called Steve, who's the farm manager at Worthy Farm, and got all this useful information off him, and started talking about this industrialised versus local system. So this is what the site of Worthy Farm looks like, where my project is. So this is the cow shed over here, and that's where all the maize comes in, and this is where the manure is stored. There's a anaerobic digester that's installed over there. This is a site model. I was trying to kind of model up the site to see the contours and topography. As you can see, there's an existing anaerobic digester on the site, and in the orange is where I'm proposing to install. I started analysing the system of what's happening to manure at the moment within the farm, and it gets to the digester and then currently is being mainly used as fertiliser. And this is where my project tries to intervene by taking this secondary byproduct, digestate, and mixing it with clay and straw to make a building material. So my proposal is to think of Glastonbury as a series of body parts. So maybe the heart is the pyramid stage, but my proposal is to design the digestive system, so the stomach of Glastonbury, so transforming the agricultural waste into building materials and sustainable energy. So looking at the site, I've decided to locate my project over this side, mainly because it is located in adjacency to a digestate tank, which I'm going to build the bricks out of, and also a maize storage, and because of the access in and out of the site. Taking inspiration from surrounding buildings, I wanted to take the traditional form of a Dutch barn and within my spatial proposition try and suggest an alternative way of designing these agricultural structures by using sustainable and local waste materials. So I began going through a process of drawing out how this could work on site. Could it be the end of this stomach digestive system? And I used drawing as a tool just to try and, in the initial phase, figure out how this would sit on the site in different configurations. I then moved on to trying to model this in some massing models to look at if you pushed and pulled these Dutch barn structures, which bases would be subsequently created. And this has led me to this program diagram, which consists of 4 different spaces. So I produced a short stop motion to try and give you an understanding of the phasing of my project. So it all starts with a cow producing manure. So the average cow in Worthy Farm is producing 50 kilograms of manure each day, then installing adequate storage for this manure, then installing an anaerobic digester, which converts this manure into biogas, and then taking the digestate, the secondary byproduct, and turning it into bricks, and then firing these bricks within a kiln that is powered by the biogas from the digester. And then taking these bricks that are fired to build these series of Dutch barn structures which house a brick workshop, an educational workshop, and then a museum situated on the site of Worthy Farm. A key driving factor behind the design is this idea of trying to integrate the material investigation into the design of this proposition and using it as a test bed for different configurations of how far you can push these materials. So this is evident in the brick arch that I proposed, that looks at installing a 3-layered brick shell system, and this was inspired by looking at a series of precedents whereby very thin and lightweight brick materials are used in a self-supporting manner. I'm now going to show you a short video that's going to keep running to the end of the presentation of how I made one of these bricks. To determine how many bricks this facility would be producing, I did a kind of a study to analyse, okay, the average cow on Worthy Farm is producing 50 kilograms of manure per day. There's 500 cows in total on the farm, and 80% of this manure is being used to fertilise the fields. So that left me with 20% of this total manure I would use to make these bricks, which I then established would allow me to make 10,000 bricks per day within the workshop. My next question was, what does the shit brick want to be? So after establishing these 8 shades of shit, as I termed them, I wanted to explore through a hands-on approach how these could be used within the building, both internally, externally, and as infill. After having conversations with a couple of different brick manufacturing companies, I established that if I was to create 10,000 bricks a day, that would need roughly 25 people working at this facility full time. And this has become a key driving force behind the proposal of trying to create additional jobs, particularly in a rural context where job rates are particularly low, and trying to create an alternative avenue for farms and the farming industry in general to direct themselves away from this criticism to do with environmental impact and towards potentially a new sustainable way of operating. So the third Dutch barn structure within the proposal is for an educational facility, and on the ground floor of this building there will be a maize husk workshop where I'm going to draw in my explorations that I did at the beginning of the year, and the idea is that these different material prototypes and outputs could be then tested and used within the context of the festival. And the final aspect of the proposition is this public museum that tries to close the gap between the farmer and the member of the public, and it was inspired by the Ship Museum in Italy, which I mentioned earlier. But actually, in response to not being allowed insight into their recipe of making their building material, I'm really keen for this to be an open source facility that brings the public in and kind of shares expertise about these different waste building products. The idea is that the materials that are created within this facility and exhibited in the museum are then used and tested within the context of Glastonbury. So this could potentially be in the form of a tent, let's say, made out of maize husk. I've also been looking at the idea of integrating human waste or food waste into the facility in a future scenario. But thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to having a discussion. If you have any questions, fire away. But yeah, that's why Cowship matters. I hope it's made an impact. That's something I'm passionate about, and yeah, thanks for listening.